Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. In a comic book video today, we're going to take a look at a interesting series, at least interesting in my opinion, that Marvel produced back in 1986, Dakota North Investigations. Might look to you like it was a 5-issue limited series. Well, no, it was a regular series that was limited to 5 issues because it got canceled. It was a bi-monthly series, so you got 5 over the course of 10 months. And I suppose a lot of people would say, well, that's kind of proof that it was no good. Well, I don't think it is. But I think there probably were a few things that got in the way of its popularity. So let's take a look. Now, the one nice thing is that you do get a complete storyline in these 5 issues. There was probably some warning that it was going to be canceled, I would expect. So they were able to wrap things up a bit. So we're not left with a sort of a cliffhanger. We don't know what happened. Now we do get to know what happened. That's really cool. But we're going to take a look at maybe, what it was about, maybe why it didn't do as well as it could have, and maybe why you might want to check it out. Now, I first got an issue, actually 2, from a 50-cent bin at my local comic shop. It was a series that I had wanted to check out for some time. I can remember seeing ads for it in other comic books. It piqued my interest. I found another issue later on in a dollar bin, and then I finally just went to mycomicshop.com and bought the other 2 so I could round out the series. So, truth be told, you could probably have the entire 5-issue run for, $10 to $12, maybe plus shipping. So, not an expensive thing to get into. All right. So, let's pull it in here. We're going to take a look at the first issue in a little bit of depth. Not a ton of depth, but a little bit of depth. Because that way we can introduce what it's all about. And at the same time, not ruin the story for everybody. Now, the first thing you notice on this page are the little character images over there on the side. Dakota, Ricky, SJ, Mad Dog, Amos, and Cleo. The first thing that makes me think of is a DC comic book, not Marvel. I have a feeling Dakota North would have done better at DC Comics. I think it would have fit in with their universe a little bit better than it did with the Marvel universe. And in fact, in these 5 issues, we don't really have any guest stars from the Marvel universe. So it really could almost be looked at as its own thing. Now, they have in later years apparently used Dakota North in some other stories. So she is clearly part of the Marvel Universe. I think she would have fit in a little bit better over at DC. The script is by Martha Thomas's, art Tony Salmons, letters Jim Novak, coloring Christy Scheel, editing Larry Hama, editor-in-chief is Jim Shooter. Now apparently Denny O'Neil had something to do as well with getting Thomas's to write this series. Hama was her editor, and she did say in an interview I saw that the problems she had doing the series were primarily that she didn't write fast enough for a monthly or even bi-monthly series, and she was reticent about big action scenes. And Hama would have to sort of say, "Let's do this. Say let's need something to punch this up," and he would tell her, that we have an infinite special effects budget in comic books. It takes the same amount of money to have like a giant explosion as it does to have 2 people sitting at a table eating dinner. So go for it. And I think she did, but maybe it was not the right thing for her. But I think she did a really nice job with this and created some interesting characters that have some depth to them. But really mostly just a really fun action comic, action adventure, that kind of thing. Maybe sort of in the vein, well, I shouldn't say in the vein maybe because this came first, but in the vein of like a Lara Croft. So we instantly get nice little splash. Look out, Dakota. Eat lead, geek face. So here's Dakota. Here's Mad Dog. Who is he shooting at? Well, he's actually in a shooting range in her offices. And Mad Dog took out like an old lady with a shopping bag. He's called Mad Dog for a reason. She's not, real impressed at this point with his shooting. She says here, don't give up. Your aim is improving, kiddo. Now get the phone. If it's a bill collector or my dad, get rid of him. So she's not ready to put him out in the field yet. He might be a little bit dangerous. And the person who's shown up is Detective Culhane. Now, Culhane is sort of a love interest. I think at this point, he's already fallen for Dakota. She's not really shopping around for a boyfriend, but I think she likes him, has some respect for him. So we get to see her on the gun range shooting, so you get an idea of her skills. Now, he shows up to talk about something with her. She gets that phone call, which is a job, and so she hops on her motorcycle, and off she goes. So she is a woman of action, and at this point, you wouldn't really be, looking at her any different than other street level heroes in the Marvel universe. Luke Cage, Iron Fist. I mean, obviously they have superpowers and she doesn't, but she's skilled enough with guns and with everything else that it doesn't really matter. Again, an action heroine. So this call brings her to a modeling agency, a photo shoot. I think at some point we figure out that she was maybe a model at some point in her life before she went into detective work. So she goes, she gets the lowdown. Somebody's trying to ruin this guy, yada, yada, yada. And then we're introduced to her little brother, Ricky, and that's their dad, SJ. Now, this guy is old-time espionage, served in the war, and you can see the guy tries to steal the boombox, and he's staring down the barrel of his gun. So, he's a no-nonsense kind of old dude. So he has something he has to take care of, and he's going to go ahead and pawn Ricky off on his big sister, Dakota. Ricky, you could tell from the sunglasses, you could tell from his attitude here, it's sort of he's a bit obnoxious, a bit arrogant. He kind of sees himself as a playa, that kind of dude. And in fact, the one reason he goes ahead and goes along with what his father wants is because his dad offers him $200 a week to do it. So Ricky is he's probably a future con man. So Dakota ends up having this meeting at the Guggenheim, and we see, here's one of the bad guys who's making deals to get rid of her client. We get this scene with one of the museum guards, kind of takes him out, but I like how he goes down, and then in the background we have this pop art of somebody getting punched in the face. It is a very stylish comic book, both in terms of the style of the art and the way the art is depicted. It reminds me a lot of, some of the good cartooning we got in the past. And again, kind of the stuff we see with DC Comics, much more than with Marvel Comics. This one just doesn't really fit in to the Marvel milieu that well. It might have had something to do with its failure to get an audience. There was a time when there were people who were Marvel people, and there were people who were DC people. And the DC people who might have actually dug this a little bit more, they see Marvel on it, they're not probably looking at it that closely. And of course, there were probably also guys who, saw a comic book about a woman and just weren't interested and really didn't know what they were missing. We're now going to be introduced at on an expensive corner of Park Avenue, as it says, to the big villain of the piece. And that is going to be Cleo Vanderlip, who has big plans. We see her up here. Again, you can see there's a sort of a 1940s, 1950s vibe to the way this is drawn. So she has these big plans for taking over this guy's business by ruining him. We get to see a little bit more of Culhane and Dakota. He's trying to have a date with her. He's maybe it's actually going to work out this time. There's a ring on the doorbell, and Ricky shows up, and Dakota's pretty PO'd about this, but she does have to deal with it. The detective has to go. She's like, no, it's okay. I'll have him out right away. I don't think so, Dakota. Ricky looks as stubborn as your old man. Good night. Who's the snappy dresser? Ricky. Okay, so we get a little bit of sister-brother, thing going on there, which is fun. We have Dakota trying to infiltrate and get some information. And this guy with the knives catches on pretty quickly to what she's up to. So it's a fun comic. This all leads to a chase scene where she's on her bike and she ends up in a department store. Basically Bloomingdale's, but they're just calling it Bloomies. Which again, kind of more of a DC thing to have a fictional department store rather than just calling it Bloomingdale's. So we get her on the bike crashing through a window, going up the escalator. Fun stuff. And then a little bit of gunplay. She saves the fashion designer, And okay, yes, does it sort of turn the thing upside down with the female heroine saving the male victim? Yeah, but not in a way that's meant to belittle anybody. I think it keeps it pretty fun. So ultimately, what we end up with is a much bigger storyline involving something that Dakota's father was involved in. And here we have a nice little ad. This gives you an idea of what they're going for. Style, bi-monthly from Marvel. Kind of reminds me a little bit of some of the work Silvestri was doing on the X-Men. Pretty close to this time period. The way he drew women. Always had always looked a little bit like a fashion sketch to me. The way he would pose them. And they were always very, long, lean, sort of, again, if you ever seen the work that fashion designers will do on clothes, with the thing they'll draw with the sort of the concept tends to be very tall sort of models in those images. And it always kind of reminded me of Silvestri's work, and you do see it brought through a little bit here. So they end up on this ship. There's more gunplay. There's Ricky getting involved too, so we get a kid with a gun. Wouldn't probably go over that well nowadays. And so we also see Ricky is obviously having an impact on Mad Dog back at the place, but they do manage to take out the immediate bad guy, but not Cleo. We'll meet again, Ms. North, and you'll pay for this. Okay. And then we find out that Dakota has a husband. What? Does she really? Well, we'll find out in other issues. And so, like I said, ultimately this is going to become a story about, well, you could call it a MacGuffin, but a particular item that falls into the unknowing clutches of Ricky, that involves Dakota and that detective pal of hers going over to Europe to sort things out. You have the world of high fashion and espionage sort of colliding here. It's a good book. It has plenty of action, plenty of adventure. I think what maybe turned off some people who might have been interested in a book about a heroine who was written by a woman was the fact that it was not a lecture. These books were not a lecture series about men and women and feminism, etc. It was an adventure story about a character. If you dig like Steve Canyon, you might dig Dakota North. It's that kind of thing. They weren't trying to change the world with these. And again, that's a no-no for some people. They don't like that. They like things to be a little bit more political. You just didn't get that here. So I think for a variety of reasons, a female lead character, not leaning into the politics for a particular segment of the audience, and really a story that fits better with the DC milieu than Marvel's, Dakota North just did not pick up the audience that they wanted, and it got canceled. But I'm going to tell you right now, Thomas's does a really nice job with this. There are certain aspects that kind of remind me of European comics, some of the dialogue, some of the way it's paced. So maybe there's a little influence there from those. I think the art by Salmons is really good. It's stylized, it's stylish, but it definitely gets the point across and does a good job of presenting the action and telling the story. So I'll tell you what, I think Dakota North, even though it only got 5 issues, is worth taking a look at. You might want to go check it out. Again, you could probably find it at a pretty decent price out there. Fun book, good cartooning, good stuff. Well, that'll do it for this little retrospective of Dakota North. You might want to check this one out if you are a fan, or if, you know what, if you had problems with it back in the day. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Maybe think of subscribing. Maybe think of sharing with a friend. That's always very cool. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Read some Dakota North. I'll tell you what, too. This nowadays would have got adapted into a TV series or a movie in about 5 seconds. And done well, it could have been a really great movie. C'est la vie. But go ahead and give it a read. And I'll see you again, hopefully soon, in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.